So it's great to see you this morning, Michael. We've got a really interesting challenge to talk about how to deal with the talent issue in a new millennium and a new set of circumstances that have beset us over the last 18 months. So I just thought it would be great for us to kind of get started to put some boundaries around the space we want to talk about. So as I was reflecting on the last few years, I realized that it seemed to me that there was a pivotal transformation that happened actually almost 2 decades ago with the advent of the internet. And so you and I have been working together for a long time. So I'd like to just give you a minute to tell us a little bit about your background, and that'll set the stage for all of our listeners.
So I have a very diverse background. I started out in consultancy. I ended up working for 2 very, very large global companies, and managed big business units and was CMO of 3 public companies over the course of my career. I spent maybe a decade running my own consulting company and have been working in the startup world for now maybe 20 years or something like that.
Cool, thank you. So mine isn't quite so glorious. It's just been, I've been struggling and starting up companies since I was 8. Some have been very successful and some not. So I've started, since 1980, I've started 5 companies and took a public company through 25x market cap growth. So I've managed to pick up plenty of scars, and many of those scars have to deal with the talent and human resources issues that I'd like to chat about this morning. So to focus at, so you said that you've been in the startup world for about 20 years. Well, that takes us back nearly to the advent of the internet, but certainly one of the most breakthrough or differential items was the release of Mosaic, the first graphic browser for the internet. While it had been around for a while, that's something that really began to change everything. And that happened about 95 or 96. So what were you doing about that 95 to 2000 timeframe?
So at that time, I was running the printer business for Canon in the US. This eventually was almost a $700 million business.
So you were finding that you had to find talent of a variety of sorts as part of that activity. So how would you characterize that talent identification process at that stage?
So, one of the things that I learned over the course of my career was that there are efficient people, managerially efficient people, and managerially inefficient people. And what do I mean by that? We had a guy at Canon, a nice guy, bright guy, who wanted to be in my business unit.
Yes.
And I liked him. And I said, great, you got the job. Because I thought that he was a good kid, and he was a smart person, and he was a hardworking person, very conscientious person. And I gave him carte blanche to do what he wanted in this business unit. I had a product idea that I wanted him to go execute, and he lasted less than 2 weeks.
So why was that? So here we got a hardworking person that has a good work ethic, and yet it didn't work out. So how can that be?
Yeah, so what I learned was that there are, I think of management as like a a gas pump. And employees.
Like a what?
Like a gas pump.
A gas pump?
A gas pump. And
like I put gas in my car?
Yeah. And employees need gas. They need fuel to operate. And I discovered through this process with this one gentleman that he was very fuel inefficient. He could not make any decisions and drive away and do anything without constant fuel. And so every hour he'd come back to me, and he couldn't make a single decision on his own. He couldn't do things on his own. And I discovered this idea that I had an employee who I hired almost on the spot, who was just the opposite. She was a young woman who I came across. My boss said, look, I have a friend, his niece is in town. She's looking for a job. I interviewed her, offered her the job on the spot. Why? Because I thought that she was a self-starter. She worked for me for 5 years. She was a self-starter. She didn't need fuel. She needed direction. And so out of that process of those two as a good contrast, I recognize there are some people that there's my buddy used to describe, he's a pilot. He said, all thrust, no vector.
Oh, and all thrust, no vector?
No vector. You got to get them on the right vector. But once you get them on the right vector, boom, they're going to go and get it done. And there are other people who need constant motivation or constant managerial support. And I learned at that time that it is very inefficient to manage people who need external stimulus.
So
okay?
So if you look at that, does that still play out for you in today's circumstances? Because
more
what
than
I want
ever.
to do is
more
so. So tell me a little bit. Why do you say it's more so now than it was important, 15 or 20 years ago?
Well, let's break let's break it up into, let's talk up more of like a 40-year span, because I sort of see it as 3 phases. Okay. Phase 1 was maybe the phase when you were young, which
when I was young.
Social.
I'm not sure I was ever young, but
there was a
probably once upon a time.
There is a social construct between you and an employer.
Yes.
If you work hard for me, I will hire you and pay you for life. Okay?
Yes. That was certainly that was the implied context when I was a kid. However, I never believed it. I never bought into that.
And when I got into business, it existed, but it was at the tail end of its existence. Okay?
Yes.
And as you got into that mid-90s era till, I don't know, maybe 20 years after that, maybe even as little as to 2008, maybe it was only 10 or 12 years. But you had this idea that you could be a free agent, okay? And you were a free agent because the social contract had been broken anyway. We had had many downturns, and people who were talented had lost their job. There was no protection of talent.
Yes.
And so people decided they had to self-organize. Okay. And now we're in a place where that self-organization is at an all-time high. And I'll describe it this way. You have a concept called agency theory. And agency theory says that you can either have agents who are employees of the entity, or you can have outsiders, which are more transactional, and they're not employees of the firm. And what happens is that you have costs of having agents because agents have self-interest, and you have a problem with transactional in that it is hard to find that talent and to get the talent paid, and there's a lot of risk in transactions. Over the last 25 years, through the internet, we have lowered the risk of buying talent. We have increased the access and visibility of talent. And we've figured out how to pay people. I'll tell you right now, I need a video done for our company. I'm going to go to Fiverr, and for about $200, I will get a video spokesperson who I've never met on a platform where I will pay the platform and the platform will pay her. I've bought translators, I've bought voiceover people, I've bought all sorts of video production through this. These are not employees. They are outsiders to my entity who I now can bring in. It's the new wave.
So this is, so I will make a confession that this is a transition that I'm experiencing some difficulty with. And that's probably a generational difficulty, which is, you know, when I started my a couple of companies ago, Interworks. So when I started Interworks was in about 1995. So Windows 95 had just been launched and I was actively engaged in it. But I made a decision at that point that I would not hire contractors, that I would hire employees to actually build the software products that we were taking to market. And I had this belief that was part of that earlier social contract you just talked about. And there may be many people who are watching this video or experience that same belief, which is that employees will be more loyal than contractors. And to some extent, well, I discovered over time that I was wrong, and that loyalty was a misplaced value. And so the loyalty for me was this implied long-term relationship. And we were beginning, the people that I was hiring were from a different generation, a later generation, more in your generation, Michael. And because the social contract had been broken, they didn't have that same loyalty desire for the most part.
Oh, no,
However, they would work really hard. They would do exactly what I wanted.
I think they had it. They just didn't have the loyalty trust. So I think that generation, and certainly the generation now, you know, we look at our business today and our customers.
Yes.
Our customers' employees, 6-8 months in the job and they're on to the next job. 1 year into the job, they're on to the next job. And you look at that and you go, that's an untrustworthy person. You go, no, that is the nature of the industry today. And so I do not demand loyalty of my people. I have never demanded loyalty of my people. I look at my job as a manager,
yes,
is to make my employees' career as successful as possible. And if I can facilitate that success while working for me, great. If I cannot facilitate that, I want them to leave the job better than when they came in, more able than they came in, better equipped than when they came in. And it is a temporary fiduciary role. It is not a permanent servient role. They are not my slaves. They're not my servants.
You brought in a new piece of vocabulary there, which was fiduciary. So I came to that same kind of a position about, or thinking about 2005.
Okay.
And I realized that the people that had become my employees, I realized that my business could not grow at the same pace that their career requirements would grow, because many of them were programmers. And so programmers need to make a bet on the domain of expertise that they develop. Those domains of expertise are arriving at a far greater rate than my company could grow the demand for internal consumption. Did that make sense?
Yep.
And so I had to begin to look at things differently, and I began to be actively engaged in helping my staff find new career opportunities if they chose. And so when we got to that place, it was a paradox, because what I saw was when I came to that leadership position, productivity went through the roof. And people said, how do I prepare myself for my next job? And I didn't look at that as bad news. And it was very gratifying to be able to help others find a good job and still keep the relationships.
So I had an interesting background, because I had two back-to-back women bosses, and they were both amazing bosses for different reasons. The first one, I remember the first day on the job, she said, let's be clear. You have one job, make me look good. I have one job, make my boss look good. If you accomplish that goal, we're good. Okay?
Yes.
And so that taught me what it meant to be a good employee, which was always be conscientious of the implications of what I did. She didn't question my intelligence or my aptitude. She said, just always remember, you're here to serve my interests and my boss's interests. And so be aligned with that and you're good. Okay. Now, my next boss was an interesting woman. She was an exceptional person. And her example was, my job as the leader was to protect me from the company. Okay. So yes. She says, I don't need to, I know that you're competent at the job that you do. My job as your boss is not to guide you, but to protect you. And what that meant was advocating for the things that I was trying to accomplish, getting administrative things out of my way. If there was politics, she would fight the political fight for me so that I could accomplish what I needed to accomplish. And I came away from that experience with an understanding of servant leadership. And it was not because it was some brilliant idea I had, it was because of observing how she was a servant leader for me, that she saw the job of the boss not as the dictator, but as the protector and the defender. And it was just, it was a life-changing perspective, and I've tried to live up to that concept since.
So now I want to challenge you, but I didn't tell you ahead of time. How would you encapsulate that as a recommendation for the people who are watching this video?
Well, I think that you are always a servant of two masters. One master is those that are above you. And I'm a CEO and a chairman of the board, but I serve my shareholders. I am their servant. Okay.
Got it.
My job is as a fiduciary to manage their assets in the greatest ability that I can bring to bear in that. I am also a support person for my team. I don't look at myself as superior to my team. I'm a musician, and when you're in an orchestra, you might play the French horn and somebody else might play the violin. No one is superior to the other. You have different roles, okay? And the conductor doesn't actually do anything. The conductor is an actor and a dancer.
Yes.
And I have fun stories about that that I could tell but aren't relevant to the topic. But the reality is that my executive team are my peers. I just have a different instrument I'm playing. And I ultimately have the final say, but I'm not a dictator. I don't dictate, because if you're a dictator, you might be successful. If you're a Steve Jobs, I'm not saying it never works, but I find that that is very rare that the average person is successful with that strategy. It's not worked for me. It's not something that I ascribe to. So I would say if you're an employee, follow my first boss. She wasn't my first boss, but understand you need to be a person who makes your employer successful. If you do that, you made a comment earlier, which I don't know if I agree. I think that loyalty is as strong today as it was before. What's different now is the loyalty is corporately transient. What that means is that that person you are loyal to will transfer from job to job to job, but will bring you to those next gigs, either as an independent worker or as an employee or whatever, because you've established this trusted relationship. They are loyal to you, you are loyal to them individually, not corporately. And that if you are focused on making them look good, and you do make them look good, they're going to want to bring you to the next place. And that's true whether you're in a corporate setting or in a gig economy setting. I think it's true in both cases.
And that makes, so I had, one of my notes here was a question about trust erosion. And as we were talking about that today, and we've talked about that in the past, I'm not confident that trust has eroded. It has just been reallocated. So the institutional trust may be replaced by personal trust. So the people who are watching this video are business leaders throughout Brazil. And so one of the things that we are advocating for here, I think, so correct me, is that you focus on building trust and identifying others in whom you grant trust, and realize that you will make mistakes from time to time, but don't be bashful about granting trust. It's worth the risk. And so this kind of segues me into this notion of trust as an investment. So you and I have both, or mostly me, I've been working with entrepreneurs, investors, and innovation centers for the last 10 years, and really focused on how do I bring together resources that equip investors, entrepreneurs, and innovation centers to improve their performance. And I realize, as I reflect on this, that I have been using the gig economy in a way that I had not previously realized, because the faculty for the programs that I lead are all temporary workers. but they're all experts in their domain. And so I can, with very little guidance, say, lead a class that describes due diligence. Okay, so I've got somebody that's led dozens of due diligence initiatives that leads that class and helps entrepreneurs, but also helps investors understand. So if I understand what you're suggesting is, I trust Craig to accurately address the issues that are most important related to that topic.
So there's several layers of trust in there. One of the things that's happened through the internet is that we have an arbitration of risk managed through a gig platform, right? Okay. Just think of Uber, right? Uber has a payment processing facility that if the driver, the probability the driver is going to get stiffed is 0.
Yes.
The probability that I'm going to get robbed is 0. A lot of the risk in that environment happens. So when you're trying to hire someone with a specialized skill, you now can go to places that have reviews, and you can see people's scores, and you can read the reviews. You might even be able to see copies of their work. That kind of accessibility, especially since I'm doing it globally. I had an opportunity to sell into Japan. I don't speak Japanese. Our collateral is not in Japanese. I found a Japanese person in Japan who translated my stuff in 2 days and cost me $15. It would have cost $200 if I had done it locally. And it was perfect. It was flawless and completely effortless. So all of the friction was removed, but all of the risk was removed. And so the trust was implicit in the buy-sell relationship.
So you bring up another point that about friction. So as we think about guidance to provide to the people who are watching this video, as in your experience, how do you reduce the friction in locating talent and developing talent?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a very organic process.
Okay.
I believe in the network. It's trusteds, if you think about it that way.
Yes.
So I have I hired a guy this year who's been an exceptional hire. I was introduced to him because one of my investors works with his wife and said, I've met this guy. He's a super sharp guy. I trust this investor. He's a very bright guy. He's a CFO. He's a very bright guy, senior officer.
Yes.
And he gave me the background. I met the guy and I hired him. And, part of it is being willing. I mean, the example of the first woman that I mentioned that I hired, she was the niece of a friend of my boss. Okay. The funny story was that I reached her on the phone. I said, I heard that you're looking for a job. I'd like to meet you. And she said, when would you like to meet? I said, now. And she said, well, I'm actually coming back from the gym. Can I get changed? And I said, no. Because I'm not going to make a decision based upon how you're dressed. I'm going to make a decision on whether you're talented or not. And the reality was she was fantastic. And she was a great employee, and she worked for me a long time and had a great career. I'm very proud of the career that I observed she had after I left the company. She had a great career. And so I don't care. It's just my own personal thing about that's all there's 12 people who have to go through the process or whatever. What I'm looking for is specific things. And I would say today, if you were to ask me what's the most important thing, I would probably say the self-driven personality. I have a desire to get things done, and I get things done. That's something you can't teach.
Yes.
The second thing I would say is fit, cultural fit. That's extremely important for organizational success.
So how do I discern whether I have the capabilities that you're suggesting here? Because what you've just done is express a sense of intuition as well as structure. And for the last 30 or 40 years, we have attempted to put, I see us attempting to put boundaries in the form of process to reduce the risk. And you're shining a different light on how to go about risk mitigation with regard to new hires in particular. But you bring this to bear not just on new hires, but how do you vet people who are advisors, for instance? Because you've got a broad community of advisors as well as board members. So can you speak to those two issues in particular? Because
yes,
that's really powerful talent acquisition.
Okay, so I've had a history over the course of my life of collecting talent through acquaintances, just people I connect.
Yes.
I think that there's two things that I try to sort out, and they're important to delineate. I am a very open person to advice. We've talked about that in the past.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so there are people that I will seek advice from. After this call, I have a meeting with a guy who is going to offer me very specific advice. He mentioned something in a talk I was giving, and he said, I've actually got experience with that. And when I listened to him, his experience was better than the experience I was presenting. And so we agreed that he would give me 15, 20 minutes, and I would seek that advice. And I'm going to do that in an hour. There's a second group, which are people who are going to be my boss. Okay. So when I set about building my board, I am hiring a boss. Yes. I am hiring somebody whose advice I must apply, or at least very seriously consider applying. Yes. So the level of, like, this guy, I barely know this guy, and yes. He's going to give me his advice. He has a successful company. He's not in my space, and great. I'm going to get that from him. I've given him some things. He's given me some things. Fantastic. We had a nice reciprocity. Okay.
So I want to come back to reciprocity.
I gave him value first. He's going to give me some value back. All good. But when I hire a board, I need very specific things. And sometimes I need a board to be, I always need a board to be constructive, but not always do you need the board to be agreeable. Okay?
Yes.
And so when you pick a board, I have a board right now that is holding us to a superior level, the superior standard than we had in the past. And I'm happy about the board because the board's doing its job. Okay. And I was CMO of a public company. I was the 7th CMO in 4 years. There had been like 9 CEOs or 10 CEOs. And the board was consistent, without naming names, of the number 1, number 2, number 3 venture capitalists in Silicon Valley at that time. These were It was a blue chip board. And about 2 weeks before I was brought in the midst of another turnaround situation, my new CEO went to the board and gave them a report card and gave them an F and said, you guys are brilliant people and a horrible board. And here's the job of a board. And if you're not willing to do those jobs, get out. And he got rid of, I would say, 70% of the arrogance that was on the board, because he said, look, you have a job to do. It's not a privilege to be on the board. You have a job to do. And so when I keep that in the back of my mind, what is my board supposed to do? And
Yes.
I'm hiring for those attributes and to bring that in.
So, there's a consistent theme that you've been kind of dancing around. And I want to bring some focus to that theme. And I believe that theme is preparation and consistency. And so what you have reported repeatedly is that you figure out what it is that you need produced and go find people through whatever mechanisms you can who have the wherewithal to be able to produce that target outcome. So the reason I bring this up is all too often I observe that people focus on what do I want my board to do? And what you've said in so many words repeatedly is that it's not what they do that you care about, it's that the outcome that they produce for the benefit of you and your shareholders.
Right.
But that's a radically different way of thinking, especially people who have grown up in a politically dictatorial social climate. And so I addressed that issue specifically because of the political stringency of countries in South America in particular, but also somewhat in Europe. But it's when you have a leader that is a servant leader and is looking for target outcomes over process, that changes, and it syncs up very well with the current generation where we're trying to find employees and advisors and board members.
So I want to be political for a minute because I think it helps to understand my way of thinking.
Okay, good.
I don't believe in a command economy. I don't think that a command economy is efficient. Okay.
So tell me what. So
a
tell me
command
about
economy
command
is
economy.
one person at the top of say a country is
Yes.
dictating how many products get built and all of the supply and demand stuff. And you go,
Yes.
so I don't believe in that from a governmental oversight or a top-down dictatorial process. And I had an epiphany one day. If that doesn't work for countries, why does it work for companies? And I came to this conclusion, if I honestly believe that to be true, then you need bottom-up companies, not top-down companies, okay? Now, what will make those bottom-up companies work? They need 2 or 3 very important things. You need a shared goal that the incentives are aligned to, okay? You need people who have a ethical self-determination to achieve that goal, okay?
So that goes back to one of your opening comments, right? So one of the attributes that you value highly in others is that self-determination drive. Am I on the right track here?
Yes, that you are a
Okay.
person who has maybe high conscientiousness, okay?
Yes.
Which is that you have a predisposition to be helpful to solve the problem you've been set aside to solve. My job is to create an environment where you can solve the problem, because you will naturally want to yourself. I don't think that the non-dictatorial approach works when people are lazy. So you don't want to hire lazy people. You want to hire people who have that predisposition to accomplish and get things done. And then you need a common goal, and then you need a shared culture of how you treat one another in the accomplishment of that goal. And if you don't manage that culture correctly, which is a culture based on selflessness, not selfishness, okay?
Yes.
That we are all subservient to the vision that we're trying to do, okay?
So
and if you're clear on that, then everything else will align.
So this is very reminiscent of some work that I did around 2000, which was I did some writing about mission, vision, values, strategy, tactics, plans, activities, and that when you're clear about the outcomes that signify success. I mean, so something that you and I talked about years ago was everybody has, but doesn't examine, what are the 5 key metrics that let you know you've had a good day or not? You have them because every day when you go to sleep at night, you are clicking off, well, did I have a good day or a sucky day? So what are the things that you click through in your brain when you make that judgment?
So for me, I believe the fundamental driver of at least the types of people I hire and the type of environment I try to create, there's a Greek god, Sisyphus, who apparently slept with Zeus's wife or something like this. The punishment that he was given is he had to push a rock up, a big boulder up a mountain, and when it would get to the top, it would roll back down. And it
didn't squash him.
No, but he would have to every day get up and try to push that rock up the hill, and every day it would be futile. And you think about that, that was the worst punishment to give somebody, was a futile life, okay?
Yes.
So you can do an administrative task, and you can find that administrative task to be boring in the doing of it. But if you are doing it for a purpose that you can believe in, you can get people to do it enthusiastically because they're doing good and they can feel the benefit of doing it. You have people who are being exploited by their management and being forced to do things, then agency theory applies. They start to work in their self-interest. They become lazy. They try to steal time. They try to get away with not doing things. They're in a different game. And because they're in their own self-interest, and that self-interest is not aligned because the leader is not aligned to their interest. You know, there's a funny Dilbert that I remember once. Dilbert is in the hall and he has his fingers like this and he goes like this with his fingers. And he was twiddling his thumbs, as they said. And he said, you know what's cool? I just got paid to do that. Because he was an employee and he was on an employee time. And he said, look, I just got paid to twiddle my thumbs. That's agency theory at its worst. So what's happened is we now have an economy where I don't have to hire a generalist to be able to handle a bunch of specialist tasks. I can hire specialists for very short periods of time to do all of the specialist tasks. You know, I just need a little bit of video editing. I can go hire a video editor for a week or 2 weeks. They do the task, project's done, we're good. I'm on to the next thing. I don't have to hire them.
So as I hear that, and I began to find myself getting comfortable with that. I experienced that as a great deal of freedom.
You're doing it today. You just don't think that you're doing it today. How much money have you paid out to your teachers in your classes?
So we have taught learning programs for entrepreneurs to 300 students.
Yep.
And countries around the world, 400 counting international work.
And how much have you paid out to the professors? And why do the professors work with you?
Because there's three things that they have reported. And one is they get to see what's going on that nobody else gets to see. They get to see new businesses before anybody else does. They get to learn what is coming up in the world, and they get their business opportunities. These are potential new clients for them.
And I would argue that that's the official answer, but that's not the answer.
Okay.
They do it for you. They do it for you because you have a reciprocity mindset. Okay.
Yes.
You've been very helpful for me for 20 plus years, thereabouts. And you've never once asked for anything. I've given you things and I've paid you and we've done projects together. And we've worked together and so forth, but you ask and I do it. That's it. Not because I'm hoping to get something out of it, because we have that kind of relationship, because you bring that kind of relationship. And it's that mindset that allows the Craigs and the Robs and all these guys who are incredibly talented, who have other things to do, will give you the time because you've earned the right to it. And that's, I believe I've gotten to a situation where if somebody asks me if I'll talk to somebody, I always say yes. And the first thing I ask is, how can I be helpful?
Yes.
Okay. And I have a guy that I have given 30 hours, 50 hours of advice to. Okay. I've never charged him $1. Okay. If he pays me at some point, great. If he doesn't, great. But I did something good and I can feel good about what I did. And I am choosing whether I'm exploited or not. He's not exploiting me. I'm making a decision. And I'm at a place in my life where I would rather be helpful than rich, because it's just more meaningful to me, because I'm not, worried about my next meal. And because I think that we as people really need to have purpose. And I think if you understand that every employee who walks in that door, whether full-time, part-time, gig, executive, it doesn't matter. They need purpose. They need to buy into that purpose. It's not a just BS thing on your org chart or, your statement of value. And then what you do is the complete opposite. It has to be authentic. You talk about Rob, I remember him saying, look, I got people who are dying and I want to fix that.
That's Rob Neville.
Rob Neville. And I think his people went to work for him, not because they would be rich, which I'm sure that they turned out to do just fine.
Yes.
But they did it primarily because they want to help those people. They really care.
Well, and that also turns out to be the case with the investors. So Rob managed to secure investment to the tune of $35–40 million from angel investors around the world. And I agree with you. It's because of the mission that he personally had that was executed through the business that he formed and led. the business was a means to an end, which was improving the lives of people who are ironically at risk.
So the only thing that we do as people is come together to solve problems. Okay? It is the core nature of
Yes.
sociology. So sometimes we solve political problems or cultural problems or entertainment problems. It could be all sorts of problems, but businesses are formed as an association of people to come together to make the world better.
Yes.
That's it. That's it.
Yes. And businesses don't come together without people.
It's all people.
It's all people.
It's all people. And so people are not, if you treat them like slaves, they will not align with you. Okay? So if you treat them like partners, then you have a different business and a different mindset. And those partners can be outsiders. I mean, right now I have a company that does my IT in India.
Yes.
I've had a team there for 8 years. I have people that have worked for me for years I've never met. Okay.
Yes.
I've had people work when I ran my consulting firm. I had a guy I hadn't seen in 5 years. He worked for me for 5 years without me seeing him.
Yes.
But we talked on the phone every day. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yes.
You can have these trusted relationships and know that they're doing a good job. You got to keep your eye on the ball. But if they're the right people with the right motivations, you're fine.
So this has been a fabulous discussion. And I also almost feel bad for anybody who's watching, because we have this, you and I have this opportunity to chat like this on regular occasions, or frequent. I won't say regular, but if as we wrap up, what are 3 new outcomes that you would challenge the listeners to set for themselves to improve their performance with regard to recruiting, retaining, and motivating, although I'm nervous about that. I don't.
So I would
Yes.
say in this environment,
Words of guidance.
I had a guy tell me once, if you want to run a company with a world-class team and you're only hiring people from your country, it's not world-class. Okay? And in my small little company, we've hired people from probably over 20 countries. And I've tried to get the most talent in any country I can get it at the best price I can get it. But I am not afraid to be global, even as a small company. So I would say this first advice is world-class means from the world. Okay?
Yes.
Number 2 is I would recommend, regardless of full-time, part-time, this or that, buy based upon incentives. Okay. If you have bad incentives for your employees, they will bring their own incentives to the game, and you will be managing their incentives in a way that is not helpful to you. So if your incentives are aligned, you will get more out of the employee that you hire. So make sure when you set up the comp plan, when you pick the talent, that you have thought through what incentives are you establishing for that job? And are you going to attract people who will have the same incentive as you are hoping that they will have? Okay. And number 3, I would suggest, irrespective of full-time, part-time, that the most expensive part of employment is the misalignment of culture. That if you have a honest person working for a dishonest company, or a dishonest person working for an honest company, or a selfish person working for a selfless company, and vice versa. Those are the places where you have managerial and employee friction. So make sure that you hire to the culture you have, or change your team to the culture that you wish. You know, Southwest has this philosophy. Southwest Airlines has a philosophy that says you hire for attitude and you train for competency. You can't
Yes.
make an unhappy, curmudgeon-y person happy. You can't train them into happiness. So if that's an important attribute, hire for that. And so you have to hire for the incentive, hire for the culture, align the agenda, and think globally.
Okay, that's great. So I want to capture those later and make those notes. From when I ask myself that same question, it is open your mind. As I'm speaking to myself and to others, it's open my mind, open my mind, open my mind. And when I really get tired of it, open my mind some more. Because it's so easy, especially as one gets older, it's easier to settle into the trap of familiarity and what is that? Comfort, convenience, control, certainty. I'm always working out of those motivations, and my job for myself and recommendations for others is wherever you see yourself relying on, I'm going to do that because it's comfortable or it's convenient, it makes me feel like I'm in control, or it improves my perceived certainty, break it. Because those are like, it's like plaque. It slowly accumulates, and it's like Gulliver being tied down by the Lilliputians. It's not any big single thing. It's the accumulation of habits that succumb to those four metrics.
Well,
So,
you have people who are managing processes that you wish to retain, and people managing processes you wish to change. You have to be very thoughtful of which you're hiring for the circumstance you're in. If you bring change agents into an organization that shouldn't change at the speed you wish it to, you will destroy the organization. And
yes.
if you bring in people who will support the ossification of the system you're wishing to change, you will make it impossible to change. So sometimes you have to think about how you're shaping or reshaping your culture, and who you hire has a big impact on how you migrate that culture over time.
So this has been an amazing adventure. Do you have any last comments you want to share with folks?
I think we've covered a lot.
Yes.
You know.
Okay. Then I just want to remind people to participate in the live panel discussion that's going to follow this video, and also attend to OBR Global. You can look at obr.global for learning programs for entrepreneurs, investors, and innovation centers that will be available to persons throughout Brazil, other countries in South America, South Korea, China, France, and Italy over the coming new year. And these are all programs that are built on this emerging platform of Zoom and other live but remote learning programs. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from each of you.
Thank you, everybody.